I love experiencing films from all over the world, and I don't think I've ever seen a film from Slovakia. But now that's changed. Nightsiren uses folklore and a remote location to tell a story of fear and redemption. A young woman returns to her native mountain village, searching for answers about her troubled childhood. But as she tries to uncover the truth, ancient superstitions lead the villagers to accuse her of witchcraft and murder. So, right off the bat, this is a strange film. Most of it is straightforward and easy to understand, but there is a point towards the final act of the movie that takes a twist and it ventures into territory that's difficult to determine if it's real or fantasy. We follow this young woman named Sarlata, who has returned to where she was born, only to encounter a great deal of suspicion and distrust from the residents. Now, from her background, there are rumors of a witch, as well as tragedy that surrounds her family, and this is captured really well within the storytelling. I could feel all of the anxiety and uncertainty that Sarlata was encountering as she was met with side eyes and whispers, and even creepy men following her into the forest. Now, the setting is beautiful, but it's also confusing. It's this mountainous location filled with green trees and a sloping green ground cover. But we are shown this picturesque village with homes with pointed red roofs and a towering steeple at a church. It looks almost fairy tale-ish, but is contrasted with these ramshackle hut type structures that all of the people that we see live in. Now, the people that live in the shanties, they do venture down into the town, and they sometimes wear really clean and nice clothes, but then they return to the filth of their dwellings and they carry on a barely sustainable existence. I mean, I could feel the cold and the dirt, so the filmmaking did an excellent job of capturing the aesthetic and then translating it through the screen. Charlotta encounters a couple of other young women, and one of them, named Mira, befriends her. Now, their relationship, it's a little strange, but much less so than how all of the other villagers treat Sarlata. So there is a sense of safety and refuge that's established between the two. Now, something that is very foreign to me and comes across as a very cultural aspect within the storytelling is the misogyny that is present within the village. The men are terrible to all of the women and all of the children. They openly beat and berate their wives, really any other woman, regardless of relation. I mean, it put me on edge and it made so many of these people villains just instantly. And it's kind of funny that when the villagers begin to accuse Sarlata of witchcraft, or even just the idea that she brought about bad luck, any thought of a witch seemed much less vile or evil than the villagers who were tormenting Sarlata. I mean, the scenes of the men being horrible to all the women and children, they're tough to watch, and they definitely turned my stomach. Now, there's a small mystery within the story that I think becomes pretty obvious before the reveal, but it's not something that becomes disappointing if you figure it out. I mean, first, it's minor, so guessing it isn't really that big of a deal. But then once the reveal comes, it's kind of reassuring and positive with the outcome. And while this is billed as a psychological horror, there aren't really any horror elements, save for some violence. I think this sits more appropriately as a psychological drama that uses folklore to build an atmosphere of uncertainty. And from this standpoint, it's effective, creating story beats that had me scratching my head just trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And most of the tone throughout, it's depressing and uneasy, especially as the villagers grow more antagonistic towards Sarlata as the time goes on. I said at the very beginning that this is a story of fear and redemption, and both of those themes are addressed brilliantly. We see the irrational fear of the villagers grow into something with a life of its own, as well as the dread and uncertainty that Sarlata feels about returning to her hometown. But then we witness this beautiful story of redemption, with encounters that seem like they could go sideways very quickly and terribly, but instead provide the appropriate payoff without feeling cheap or easy. Now, for me, probably the largest drawback of this movie is the point when things become dreamlike, creating imagery that's wild and weird, but also ill-defined. We see a ton of people taking part in a possible ritual of sorts, but it feels a bit forced. One aspect that involves the appearance of people does speak to the folklore aspect of the story, but it's never fully confirmed, leaving just a ton of speculation and unanswered questions. And maybe I just need to give it another watch so that I can fully get the meaning of the sequence. But upon my initial watch, it was just a tangent that didn't add to the story as a whole. Now, the movie isn't too long, at just an hour and 46 minutes, but it does have a patience to the narrative, so it can feel slower than it actually is. I didn't mind the time, especially because so many of the visuals are beautiful and captivating, and I was drawn into the mystique of Sarlata, Mira, and then the folklore that the villagers adhere to. This definitely won't be for everyone, and it certainly has an indie or artsy feel to the presentation, but it's not pretentious or inaccessible. It sort of reminds me of the film from 2022, You Won't Be Alone, not in context or premise, but the execution was quiet and unsettling while also containing a ton of beauty. So overall, Night Siren effectively builds a story of redemption and fear by using deep-seated folklore as the backbone of this drama. The settings are beautifully captured and the acting is intense and passionate, but the narrative does lose a bit when it drifts into the fantastical without circling back to reinforce the central themes. This is a gritty portrayal of rural living, made ominous by the threat of witchcraft and people's superstitions. There's a lot of sex and nudity, a bunch of profanity, and also some shocking violence. I give Night Siren 3.5 out of 5 couches. So, what's a folklore centered movie that you've seen that you could recommend to me? I'd love to know about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.